Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ned. My name is Muslim from TG Ethiopian Broadcasting. I have two questions for you. Please be patient. And Ned, these questions are not only mine. They are also questions of millions and millions of Ethiopians around the globe. 2 weeks ago, when I got a chance to ask Jen Psaki a question at her White House press briefing, she responded, I quote, I would point you to State Department. I know my colleague Ned Price is briefing later this afternoon and giving you more details on what our work is. Since this press briefing is a pooled press coverage, I was not able to come soon to ask you this question. And I'm glad I'm here today, Ned, and here is a question I asked Jen Psaki, and I want you to answer it for me. The United States and other countries have been supporting an end to the fighting in the Tigray region. And at the first step, as you know, to end the fighting, the government of Ethiopia declared a unilateral ceasefire and pulled out the troops from the Tigray region. But Tplf, the Tigray Liberation Front, rejected the ceasefire, calling it a sick joke. And the Tplf continued the war, especially by deploying child soldiers in this conflict. And if the war continues, there thousands and thousands of people will die. Ned, what is the Biden's administration statement on TPLF's refusal to accept the ceasefire and the use of children as soldiers? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. There are a couple pieces there. One, I want to be very clear on these allegations that the TPLF is recruiting child soldiers. We are very much concerned by these reports. We take these allegations very seriously. We reiterate our call for all parties to adhere strictly to international humanitarian law, and for those responsible for violations of international humanitarian law and human rights abuses to be held accountable. When it comes to the broader conflict, we have made this point before, but again, it bears repeating. We call on the TPLF. We call on the Amhara Regional Forces. We call on the Eritrean Defense Forces, on the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, and associated regional militias to end this crisis and to move towards a negotiated ceasefire. In our mind, this is what is most important: ending the conflict, moving toward that negotiated ceasefire, and providing the level of humanitarian access that the people in Tigray need, of which they are in dire need. The Ethiopian government and the TPLF need to begin ceasefire negotiations immediately and without preconditions. This should lead to a broader dialogue to find a durable political solution to this conflict. We strongly condemn any attacks that have been or may be directed against civilians in the Tigray region, regardless of the actor, whether it's organized by military or security forces or rogue elements operating there. Those who commit such acts, as I said before, must be held accountable. And we call on all parties to condemn such acts and do everything in their power to stop them. We're particularly concerned by credible reports that armed forces affiliated with the TPLF and the Tigrayan militias have engaged in attacks against Eritrean refugees in the region. Such conduct is reprehensible. It must cease. It must come to an immediate halt. Those responsible, again, should be held responsible and accountable for their actions. We're equally concerned by reports of Ethiopian security force harassment and arbitrary detention of ethnic Tigrayans in regions of Ethiopia beyond Tigray. And security force harassment and detention on the basis of ethnicity is unacceptable. We call on all parties to cease such activities and to respect human rights and the rule of law. We further call on all armed actors to comply with international humanitarian law, including the obligations regarding the protection of civilians. As we consistently stated, any effort to change Ethiopia's internal boundaries by force is unacceptable. Any issue of national importance is an issue for the Ethiopian people to decide through consensual dialogue and democratic processes, not through violence. And that is why we have put such a priority on this negotiated ceasefire. That is what we have continued to urge, urging the parties to come together immediately without preconditions, just as we push for increased humanitarian access so that the long-suffering people of Tigray can be in receipt of that relief.
The TPLF refuses the ceasefire and to accept the ceasefire, and it advances its forces to Amhara and regional Amhara and Afar regions. So, what do you say when the TPLF refuses the ceasefire? How can there will be negotiation?
Well, we have seen these reports of the expansion of the fighting. The expansion of the fighting in Tigray are concerning. The reports of the expansion of the fighting in Tigray are concerning. And it's concerning because it will only lead to more suffering and to more death. That is why we continue to say that all parties to the conflict should immediately agree to an end to the violence and to begin in earnest negotiations and political dialogue. Armed actors in Tigray and Amhara, and the government of Ethiopia need to reach an agreement that allows the ceasefire to include all parties and facilitates, as I said before, delivery of humanitarian access. The government of Eritrea, for its part, must withdraw its forces consistent with commitments by both Ethiopia and Eritrea. Please.
My final question is, during your press briefing, you often call TPLF's forces military forces. As you know, TPLF is an opposition and armed resistance to the established Ethiopian government, whether you like it or not, which makes, if the TPLF is against the government, then it makes it rebel force. Even though my English is second language, military is a name given to the armed forces of a country. So, why are you calling TPLF forces military whenever you give your press briefing? The military is for, as I said, is for given for a country forces, not just for rebel forces. So
the point we've been making, and what in part makes this conflict so concerning, is the fact that a range of actors are engaged in violence and in some cases in these reported atrocities. There are military actors involved, there are irregular forces involved, there are militias involved, there are rogue actors involved. What we have been pushing for is for the Ethiopian government and the TPLF to begin these ceasefire negotiations immediately and without preconditions, just as we call for all armed actors in this conflict. And unfortunately, there are many, to cease the violence, to cease the killing, and to respect the international legal obligations to which they're subject. We're going to have follow-up on Ethiopia? Sure.
Going back to Power's trip, did she get any concrete guarantees while in Ethiopia? Was there any commitment from the Ethiopian government on humanitarian access to Tigray? And then while we're on this, forces from Ethiopia's Tigray region have taken control of the town of Lalibela, which is a UN World Heritage Site. Mm-hmm. Do you have any reaction to this? And do you have any comment on the responsibility, if any, of forces to protect the World Heritage Site?
So on Ambassador Power's trip, I suspect there will be additional details available later today. She also had a press conference in Addis prior to the conclusion of her trip. It was during that press conference that she spoke of her conversation with the Minister of Peace. And she called, as she said, yet again, for a cessation of hostilities and unhindered humanitarian access. And she reiterated the United States' care and concern for the people of Ethiopia no matter their identity or affiliation. She, of course, also did announce a very substantial sum of aid. One of the USAID has we've worked very closely with USAID on this issue of humanitarian access. It is an issue that Ambassador Power stressed. It's an issue that Secretary Blinken has stressed directly in his conversations with Prime Minister Abiy. It's an issue that the Special Envoy, Ambassador Feltman, has stressed as well, and we will continue to work that. Remind me what your second question was?
Lalibela.
Right. When it comes to Lalibela, we recall that when the World Heritage Committee inscribed the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela to the World Heritage List, the committee described the whole of Lalibela as a testament to Ethiopia's civilization and the medieval civilization that was there. Lalibela represents part of Ethiopia's unique, diverse, and rich cultural heritage, and it's something that should serve to unite all Ethiopians. We've seen the reports that Tigrayan forces have taken Lalibela. We call on the TPLF to protect this cultural heritage. We also call on all parties to the conflict to end the violence, as I said before, to initiate talks to achieve a negotiated ceasefire, and for the TPLF to withdraw its associated military forces immediately from the Amhara and Afar regions. At the same time, we renew our calls for the Amhara regional government to withdraw immediately its associated military forces from western Tigray, and for the Eritrean government to withdraw its military forces permanently from Ethiopia. All parties, as we've said, should accelerate unhindered delivery of humanitarian assistance to those affected by the conflict, and the commercial blockade of Tigray must come to an end. Yes, Connor.
Minister of Power met the Minister of Peace, but she did not meet Prime Minister Abiy or other senior Ethiopian officials. Do you believe that she was snubbed in not having these meetings? And do you think, to Daphne's question, that your point about humanitarian access is being heard within the Ethiopian government?
In terms of the meetings that Ambassador Power had, she was able, as we've said before, to meet with the Minister of Peace. She was able to take part in a very frank conversation with the minister about these issues. We seek to engage, and we have engaged, Ethiopia's leadership at various levels. The Minister of Peace in the past, Secretary Blinken, Ambassador Feltman, have had conversations with Prime Minister Abe. We have been very clear with the Prime Minister about the need for this humanitarian access, about the need for this for ceasefire talks to start, and for a negotiated ceasefire to be on the table as an immediate priority.